Good afternoon, everyone. My name is McCain Vogel. I am the associate editor at Farm Equipment. Thanks for joining us for today for the webinar with DIS. This presentation will feature rentals expert and former top 10 Bobcat dealer in the country, Michael Freundschuh. He's going to be talking about why rentals are more relevant than ever, what a successful rental program looks like, and kind of where to get started, and a whole lot more too. So with that, Michael, I think we're ready to get started.
Sounds good. Appreciate that. Well, the first thing I would say is if you're anything like me, you're turning this webinar on when you're trying to catch up on your email or you're working on a quote for a customer or something like that. So by all means, if you want to passively listen. But I would like to actually have some discussion and actually discuss your challenges as a dealer and reasons maybe you haven't considered rental in the past or you have and it didn't work out and what those challenges were and how to resolve them. The first thing I would say is, I want to introduce myself. I know that when we advertised this particular session, it was advertised as, I was this great, wonderful expert on rental. I'm just a family dealer that grew up and happened to have a couple things go our way when we surveyed a number of peer groups. We took a lot of advice. And so in our industry, we all know there's relatively few great ideas. And there's a lot of good best practices that we can all share, discuss, and figure out how to implement in our dealerships and overcome the internal challenges that we have inside of our specific dealerships. I'll give you a brief idea of who DIS is. They're the ag industry DMS leader. They own market share for many leading brands. And so if you don't have a DMS today, or you're considering a DMS, a dealer management software to run your enterprise, have a look at DIS. They're a great product and we'd love to represent you. Myself, I grew up in the equipment industry. I've got photos of me at 3 years old playing in the buckets of skid steers. My dad was a construction guy turned Bobcats technician, turned salesman, and then turned business owner in 98. I was 8 years old at 98. For those of you old timers in the room, you know that I'm a young whippersnapper now, getting a little bit old myself. And I had the opportunity to grow up through the advent of technology. Got to spend a lot of time on computers and how they integrated back when we had the slide decks for our parts scans and stuff like that. I grew up breaking those screens and then getting yelled at. And then I used the green screens, the blue screens, the you name it screens. I've used them. Was in the parts department, was in the rental department, was in the sales department, service department, just kind of grew up through it and blessed to have some children of my own today and been married now for about 12 years. So that's a little bit about me. But as far as my expertise and where it comes from in rental, it's really a team effort. My brothers and I, there's two of my brothers that were also involved with Upstate Equipment. I always had the expertise from the financial aspect. So I would always dig into the numbers and figure out, what's driving this, how is it being driven, and what do we have to do to get the engine of sales operating more smoothly, more efficiently, creating more opportunity for us in a smaller market. Now, Upstate Equipment's in Buffalo, New York. It's not a market that is by any means the sexiest market out there, but it is, a market that provides an opportunity for rental. Syracuse, New York is another place where we were located. And then also the Twin Tiers, which is near Elmira. For those of you that are familiar with the New York area. And then also we had a store in South Buffalo, the Hamburg area. And then since I resigned in October 23, a store has been opened in Batavia, New York. And each of these stores has its own rental fleet. And so, that's going to be the crux of what we're talking about today is, okay, Mike's this product expert, Mike's this rental expert, but who does he know and how does he know him? So in October 23, I resigned. By March, I had found my way to Constellation Software. I resigned specifically to spend more time with my kids, and then my wife kicked me back out of the house and said, that's enough time at home, go find something else to do. And so Constellation had been knocking at the door. They said, hey, will you build a rental product? And so I I said, sure. Came on board, and one thing that's been missing in our sales first organizations has been a rental product that's completely integrated. And it's been that, we were sales first as well. Our story is very similar to many dealers where we just want to sell more equipment. Ultimately that's the business we're in, but rental was growing, and we wanted to take advantage of that. And so in probably 13 or 14, we really started making a earnest investment into our fleet. And we went from 4 skid steers up to 8 skid steers. And then we said, hey, let's throw some excavators in. And I went from a used equipment farm to really, hey, why don't we put $1 million of fleet in every year for 3 years straight? And then let's rotate $1 million of fleet out in that 4th year, compact construction Bobcat equipment at the time. And then from there, we decided, okay, let's scale this and take it from there. So before I give you all those numbers and say, here's our success story and stuff, I think what I would like to do is ask, why, in the last 15 years, have you not gotten involved in the equipment industry? And you could either type your response or just speak up and kind of give your statement. But I'd like to hear at least 2 or 3 responses of why haven't you gotten into rental as of now? And McCain, if you see those responses coming in, by all means, speak up.
Yep, will do. So just a reminder, if you want to type an answer here and share a little bit, just go ahead and click that Q&A icon on the bottom, sort of towards the bottom right of that panel. You'll just click that button, and then you should be able to type from there. And once I see some come in, I can share what we're working with.
Yeah, and I'll keep talking because I know, dealers are busy and they do their things, but if you see those come in, just give me a heads up. But really, I think the most common things I hear as I've been traveling around, I've been to probably 200 dealers on site, seeing how they do business, seeing how their rental fleets are operating over the last year and a half. And the most common thing I hear when they don't do rental is it doesn't work in our market. And when I dive into that, there's all sorts of reasons. There's not a lot of construction projects going on in here, or it's just a homeowner's market. There's just some weekend warriors. We don't really have the big construction firms. Or and this is the worst one I hear is, there's 10 other rental houses in our area, and so we just sell our equipment to them.
All right, Michael, I've got a bunch coming in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so here's one says boss likes to sell everything. Another says I've struggled getting enough rental income to offset the depreciation.
I like that one. Yeah.
Another says it seems like a saturated market in our area. He shares that he's in the Phoenix metro area.
That's perfect. That means there's a lot of rental houses. Yep. Okay.
You want me to keep rolling through?
Yeah, that's good for the moment. Unless you see any other unique ones, just speak up as you're reading through them. So I'll speak up to a couple of those. So the first one that really jumped out at me was the depreciation one, right? Like there's not enough. It seems like we're struggling with the revenue to come up with the depreciation offset. And that's a very fair statement. I think when you're struggling to get what does that really mean, right? If you interpret that statement, that means, hey, we're struggling to sell our rental to our market. And I'd be happy to have a discussion with you about your specific market. We could look at some metrics. Some things I like to do are run the population of your counties, right? The counties that you can control. Rental's not a long, mileage game, right? You're not going to sell rentals, and you can, but most of the time you're not going to sell rentals outside of 15 to 30 miles from your dealership, and 30 is a stretch. You don't want to be running your trucks out that far. It's not convenient. You're not making money at that point. It is a paid demo, which is fantastic, but it's not something that's going to be sustainable, and you're going to struggle with that depreciation. You need to get long-term contracts, right? Contracts where it's a partnership with somebody that you normally sell to. Now, another, and that's all I'm going to say on that for the moment, but the next thing that jumped out at me was, my boss likes to sell equipment. Well, I tell you what, I loved to sell equipment as a dealer, okay? We were, from an absorption standpoint, if you're talking like, who was driving the business, we had 86% of our business was sales. Overwhelmingly, we sold equipment, right? Top 10 Bobcat dealer, you don't get there without selling iron. That's all Bobcat cares about. That's all Kubota cares about. That's all Case, and so on and so forth, right? But what we did really well is our 3 support departments, our rental, service, and parts. We made sure that those were also departments whereby we focused as a separate business. It's not the same business. A fallacy that business owners are going to look at, and they're all entrepreneurs, so this isn't a knock on them, is they're looking at, hey, this is my business. This is what I'm in the business of doing. I'm in the business of selling equipment. Wrong. You're not in the business of selling equipment. You're in the business of partnering with your customers to create opportunities for them to accomplish their business, which creates for you opportunities to make money. In most cases, traditionally, that means selling the equipment. However, there is a market, and no one would argue with this, for renting the equipment as well. And so what, as an entrepreneur, you should think of is, how do I put my hat on that says, okay, this is my sales business and this is my rental business. And yes, they do work together. As a matter of fact, they work extremely well to generate income opportunities for you together, even in a market where, and I'm going to go back to the first statement, about depreciation, even in a market where on paper, it's not making you money. Okay. I'm going to use that to transition to another topic. Okay. Taxes. All right. First of all, if you're an owner on the call, or you're somebody who's arguing with the owner about why rental, why more machines in rental, why we should grow the rental department, every single owner is going to have a tax concern. Taxes are something that are unavoidable. If you have a service and parts business, you're printing money in today's day and age. Even if the sales department isn't keeping up, right? Sales is down nationally right now in the US about 3 to 5%, depending on the dealer. Some dealers lower, some dealers are up, but it just depends on where you're at, right? But taxes you're not going to get away from them. What rental allows you to do is not just reinvest a beta portfolio in the stock market. Okay, rental allows you to take the income that you are printing from parts and service and sales and hide it in your rental fleet, in your own portfolio. In other words, you're making a bet on yourself, right? Rather than betting on the stock market, you're saying, hey, I'm in the business of selling equipment. I have a service and parts business that knows how to service equipment and sell the parts to equipment. I can open a rental shop. I can buy my own machinery in addition to the machines I'm going to sell at market. I can buy my own machinery. I can leverage terms and all that kind of stuff, but I can use that as my number one customer is now going to be me. And I'm going to use that fleet as it ages over time, and I'm going to sell that fleet at a lower than a new market sale, right? You're creating your used equipment. Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't need to create used equipment. I take trade-ins. I do all this other stuff. That's correct. But most of the time when you're taking those trade-ins, especially in the lower income markets, they're beat to hell. And so you're selling something that doesn't really represent quality used equipment. So you're not a used equipment warehouse for anybody. You're really just somewhere someone goes if they're looking to get a machine on a penny. And so what having a rental fleet allows you to do, even if your depreciation maybe isn't meeting your demands, right? You set out, I want to break even on this asset within 3 years. That's what you're supposed to do on compact construction equipment, or maybe in ag, 5 to 10 years, depending on the asset. When you're facing that and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm not getting enough rental on this to really knock it down. Well, it's one of two issues, right? One, your break even you set too aggressively for your market, which doesn't mean you shouldn't do rental. It just means you're going to be moving slower. Or two, the way that you're marketing that is traditional. Traditional marketing is where you're going to say, hey, well, we rent these items. Well, what are you really doing to push those items? Have you created sales programs, just like you do for your sales department, internally for rental? In other words, have you come up with a competitive way to get your customer coming through the door and buying a payment, and not a lease, but buying a payment that includes things like service discounts, parts discounts, where it makes more sense for you to own the equipment rather than your customer. Now, I know this is sounding complex. It is. Rental is a different business than the sales business. You need to have a different person running it. I think the number one thing I see in failed rental businesses is that they bought rental as a department and then they shared it with service, or they shared it with parts, or the owner's going to take some rental calls. That's never going to work. It does not work. And even in the software industry, since I've transitioned to this side, they will not start a project without hiring an individual to run that project. Okay, so it's a true cross-industry cross industry truth. You have to have somebody running that individual business. Guys, do you mind giving me the room and just jump in the next one?
Michael, I've got two questions that kind of pertain to what you're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So this one says the challenge we have always faced is how do we staff that rental department within our existing employee base? Do we hire? Do we use current staff? And then another problem that same person faces is how do we market that rental equipment? And then sort of a similar one, this woman says, we're looking at it, but it seems like something you can't really ease into. It's got to be a full commitment of inventory and people. So maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so great questions. I think where I'll start is this, and keep an eye on time for me, McCain, because I do want to hit the other slides.
I gotcha.
Because I can talk and talk and talk, and I'm happy to catch up with anybody after this. You'll get my contact information. Sign up for the demo at the end. We can connect. Not a problem. What I would say is this. First thing on marketing your rental fleet. How do I market my rental fleet? And McCain, could you just read those again for me, just so I can note my points that I want to hit?
Yep, sure can. So first one was the challenge we've always faced is how do we staff the rental department within our existing employee base? Do we hire? Do we utilize current staff? Another problem we face is how do we market the rental equipment? And then you want the second one I read as well?
Yes, sir, please.
So she says, we're looking at it, but it seems like something you can't really just ease into. It's got to be a full commitment of inventory and people to do it right.
Great. Like all those points. Okay, so number one, how to staff. Okay. Let's start with she stated you can't ease into it. I disagree. You can absolutely ease into it. I'm going to use an example, a personal example. Okay. We hated the thought of getting into aerial equipment for rental. Okay. Hated it. It's not what we're core good at. We're good at black, white, and orange Bobcat equipment. I'm sure a lot of you feel that way about your brands. You've been doing it for generations. And we don't know aerial. There's restrictions around aerial. We're in New York State, right? So we have all these different restrictions and everybody's got them, okay? We can come up with excuses or we can be entrepreneurs and we can say, all right, well, let's run a pilot program. Running a pilot is not the same thing as I'm going to start a rental department. If you're going to start a rental department, yes, there's an upfront expense. You are absolutely going to cost yourself money. It's an investment. You should have a business plan that says, hey, okay, I'm not making a 1-year investment. We as dealers are very good at saying, well, I threw $100,000 at it this year and it didn't do anything, so can the whole thing. That's not a business plan. A business plan is I'm going to spend $1 million over the course of 3 years, or I'm going to spend $200,000 over the course of 3 years. And I'm going to measure my returns based on what that equipment does. And I'm going to see how long a return I would get if I continued after 3 years. Here's the factors I'm going to use to market the equipment. Now, again, I'm going to dial that back just real quick. You can't ease into it. Here's how you ease into it. The pilot program that we ran for aerial was this. We drove to Ritchie Brothers in Florida. We went to the auction. We purchased used Sunbelt and United lifts. Okay, we bought 4 large mechanical aerial lifts. We bought some scissor lifts. We spent a total, I want to say, of $75,000 or $80,000. Very low investment, right, for our fleet at the time. And we watched the utilization on those items. Okay. So we put them all into the fleet. I think we purchased in January or February. We said, all right, this is until December. It's a 1-year pilot. We want to see what this equipment does. And we plugged it into our existing rental fleet. And what we did is we tapped into our customers that we already had. And we called them and said, hey, do you rent this stuff from, I won't list the competitors we had in our area, but, we said, do you rent this stuff from these people? And they would say, oh yeah, well, we go there once, twice a year. Okay, next time call us. We're going to give you the best deal. And it was just that simple, right? We're going to beat them on price and just call us. We'll save you money. And they're already our customers, right? They own our equipment. So we didn't go and we didn't go out and make new customers for this. We said, all right, here are our customers. We want to pilot this. And so when we did that, we identified about 100 customers. And by the way, software does this as well. But we identified about 100 customers that already rented from our competitors from time to time. And now we would instantly promise to save them money. So we put them on a list. And when they called, we said, okay. And we made sure that we gave them a stupidly low rate. Only the first time. Okay. After that, we went to normal market rate, but we did promise them we were going to give them that rate. So they came and got it from us. Well, guess what? Now all of a sudden we're a one-stop shop for them. And so we took that rental investment, and in the first year we had 56% utilization, which means we paid off half of our initial investment in 1 year's time. Name another market that you can do that. You can't. There's not one. And so within 3 years, we had printed money on aerial, not running a full aerial fleet. We ran, I think today my brother, I believe, has 10 or 12 aerial machines in the fleet. We don't want to be in it still, but we wanted to grow rental. And that was one opportunity we had. And it did. It added 10% to our top line. And so that's an example of how you can ease into it. So you could do the exact same thing with your fleet. If you're a Kubota dealer, for example, or a Case dealer, or let's say you're a tractor market, right? You're in your ag. Yeah, you're not going to want to feel comfortable about, okay, I'm in a rural part of the United States or Canada or wherever you are, and I want to go put a $2 million of tractors in this fleet, or $2 million of $1 million of construction, $1 million of excavators. You might not want to go that route because you haven't done your research. But I promise you, when you start writing a business plan and you do your market research, and this is my last point on this, is, somebody said earlier, I felt my market's too saturated already. Okay, that's the worst mistake to make. That's like saying I'm not going to go sell equipment in this market because there's a lot of other people already selling equipment in this market. It's a myopic failure to understand that you're living in your bubble and you're saying, okay, well, they're already doing that. There's not much money left there. The problem is most of those people have retained customers. I guarantee your customers today are going and renting from those dealers. Why would you give them a reason to go to somebody else to use some other type of brand of equipment or OEM's machine? You, as the manufacturer representative, have such a larger opportunity to capitalize on that customer because your parts are at cost, your service is at cost, and the rental machine that you're giving them is your brand that you service. You're creating your own work. In my mind, and in all my studies, and everybody I've talked to that's a dealer who looks at this, the only reason they don't chase it is this one reason. This is the only valid reason. I don't want it in my business. That is the only reason you can use that really makes sense not to have rental. Because if you don't want it, you're saying, I don't want the extra work involved to create another investment strategy for my business that will undoubtedly make me more money and save me money off of my taxes. Okay? Because it's the proof. It's the proof. The proof is in the pudding. It's the truth. It's been documented, it's been established, and that's why it's growing so much. And that's why we invested millions of dollars into a product. And that's why they're investing in me to hire me, somebody who's run a dealership since I was a kid, been a part of every department, to build products that enable us to unlock this potential as a sales first organization, not a rental first organization. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. If we have more questions, McCain, anything else that came in that you want me to speak towards?
Yep, one just came in saying, can you utilize a rental business in your current DIS system without having all equipment rental revenue?
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't comprehend.
Can you utilize a rental business in your current DIS system without having all equipment rental revenue?
I don't understand the question. If they could rephrase it.
Okay. If that was you that asked that question, maybe just try retyping it, or if you want to add some more context.
I just want to make sure I fully understand what they're asking.
Yep.
Before I try to answer it. So here's some keys. We already kind of talked through some of these. I will just point out, where will you find investment capital? I promise you, banks have gotten tougher, obviously, since post-COVID era, right? But they're not impossible. And you might be scared by the interest rates. I'm telling you right now, you have to plan. If you're somebody who hasn't started a rental business yet and you want to get into it, plan to go backwards before forwards. Okay. I'll give you a case study here. We opened a store in Elmira, New York. If you're sitting in front of your computer, you can Google it. It's right now, today, it's called Bobcat of the Big Flats. and you can search that. You can see the store. We were not in that building that's on the website, but we were in an area that's repressed. All right, there's a prison in that area. There's a lot of low income. There's some high income, really high income housing and stuff around the lakes. It's near the Finger Lakes in New York and stuff, but it's not a great area where you want to go put a fleet in. But what we saw when we went down in that area is we saw that there was these little mom and pop shop rental places with 3 or 4 machines out front, and none of them had everything, but all of them had something, right? And we realized that there was one large provider of equipment in that area. Now, it's not an area where we thought we were going to set the world on fire with rental, right? But keep in mind all these other benefits that are hidden, right? Your parts team gets to sell to them. Your service team gets to sell to them. Your customers damage the equipment, which is totally fine, because damages, while it drives us nuts, is also business, right? Our service and parts team are selling parts and service to a customer who didn't plan on being a service and parts customer, right? And then on top of that, you're generating used equipment, which in a low income market is a great thing to have. You need more used equipment. And so what we decided to do is put $1 million over the course of 3 years. We were going to put $1 million of fleet into the store. Now, we opened the store, and the store had a great service foundation, 2 technicians that were, so I think a lot of people here could probably relate. Okay, I'm smaller. I have 2 technicians, and we were doing probably $300,000 in service, parts business, maybe $260,000, $270,000 of business, maybe more. Sales side wasn't doing great, 1.6, maybe 2 million a year. And again, construction equipment. And so we said, all right, well, maybe we can bolt something onto this. And so we put $1 million of equipment out front of this store, which in that area is a big deal, right? That's a lot of iron sitting out front. And we put our rental decals all over it, right? And so we had our for sale stuff, we had our rental stuff, and it made us look like we had a really big presence, right? And it just sat. Right, that whole first year. And by the way, we hired a specific person as well, which was a huge pain. We had the branch manager kind of like own it a little bit, but he had so much going on that we were like, all right, we need to hire this rental guy. So, and by the way, we would turn that guy over, right? Because you're trying to generate this business. And if a guy doesn't have the relationships, or if we're not moving the equipment, he's going to leave. And so it's a challenge, right? But year 2, when we get into year 2, we had established enough business, been to enough fairs, all this stuff. We were doing probably $180,000 in year 2. Okay, that pays for a body, number one. Number 2, it doesn't tell you about service and parts. And service and parts, by the way, did grow by over 20% after adding the rental fleet. And then on top of that, year 3, we printed about 200, if I'm not mistaken, close to $300,000. So the point is this, okay, so if you take that in a 3-year investment plan, you invest $1 million, all right, and each year, let's just assume is $300,000. However you want to break up your IRR, you can look at that and say, all right, well, they printed $300,000 or $400,000 of revenue in the course of 3 years on $1 million investment. So you tell, you interpret that how you want to and say, is that a business that I would like to have as a part of mine? Oh, and by the way, that $1 million, we wrote off direct against profit, which our profit, if you're making profit in any business, a dealership business, that $1 million write-off is pretty handy, especially when you're trying to scale your business and grow and reinvest again in more rental fleet, which is exactly what we did. And so never think, oh, the market's too small, I shouldn't do it. Instead, think, the market's small, can I find a way to make it worth it? Because it absolutely, from a tax perspective, a service and parts perspective, and a presence perspective, to establish that you're a dominant player in the market is absolutely an intangible value that is, immeasurable. Okay. Any questions there, McCain?
Yep.
Before I move on from this?
Yep, I got a couple for you. So here's the clarification of the one before. They just added some context to say that in our current business, we have a small rental fleet and it is under a rental revenue sales code. In other words, you cannot rent equipment unless it is in the rental fleet. So what they're asking, is there a way around that, or can you have a rental fleet that is not under the rental revenue account?
Okay, they're asking a DIS specific question. It sounds like. So if the question is DIS specific and you're saying, hey, can we have a rental fleet that is not coded this way with the new Rent Hub product? The answer is yes. But that's a separate discussion, I think. That's more related to the tech. So sign up for a demo at the end of the call. I'd be happy to dive into that with you and kind of show you how that works.
All right. And then I've got another just kind of more general one here.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you do service on rental equipment, do you charge full customer rates for service or do you do it at cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're doing service, if you're thinking about writing a service program for your rental customers as a means to grow your rental business, discounted labor rate is a huge advantage, right? Hey, if you rent from us, the labor rate you're going to pay is going to be less because it's our equipment. So we give you our rental, our in-house rate. That is absolutely a marketable tactic that I've heard of people using, especially when they're trying to scale the business. And if your existing core customers complain and say, oh, that's not fair, you're giving them a better deal and I just don't get it because I bought a piece of it. Why don't I get it? Well, the answer is easy. Well, we're trying to scale the rental business and it's not for forever. It's only while we scale this up and then we get there. And usually, honestly, your customers understand too. They're businessmen. Most of them, most of us are dealing direct with business owners, right? It's business to business for the most part. And so they understand that, you're trying to grow your business. You're trying to grow. I do want to talk on one thing there though. Businesses, you might be one of these dealers. I don't do it because I have 4 really big customers that all are big rental houses and I don't want to step on their, Kool-Aid or get involved in what they're doing. And I don't want to offend them or lose their business. Can I just tell you something? You're not going to. But we had that same issue in a market where we were selling, I'm not going to name specifics, but we were selling 20 to 30 machines at a time to a customer. And we just took that customer to dinner and we sat them down. We said, hey, look, we got a lot of pressure from corporate to open rental in this location. We're a high performing business. And we understand that we've been doing business for a long time. We want to keep doing business. We're going to make it financially lucrative for you to keep doing business with us. But we just want to let you know that we are going to be opening a rental business that will directly compete with you. And we're not doing this maliciously. We're doing it as your partner, but we do have to do it. And it was very easy to have that conversation. Very, very easy. In a smaller market, it's still easy to have the conversation because this is America. Well, in many cases, this is America, or this is Canada, or this is Brazil, or wherever you happen to be right now. But it's an open market. And we do see a great opportunity there, and the business is moving towards that. In order for us to survive, we have to go there. And in order for me to keep providing you this great service of providing you equipment and having the service department and the parts department to help you out and provide for you, I also have to adapt towards rental. And it's just an easy conversation. I think people overcomplicate it. I've seen it time and again where, I sit down with an owner and they're asking me questions about, how do I scale this given these circumstances? And in almost all cases, it's just overthinking it because we're so sales first. We don't realize, hey, it's just as fair for us to go to the market. And no, they're not going to go somewhere else because they love your fleet. They love you. They love doing business with you. They're not just going to go flip their fleet because you do one thing. Now, there are malicious customers like that. And, I'm not going to make a decision for your business, but I do know who I like to do business with. So
I got one little clarification here. I think it's from the same person who answered or who asked that question. Can't totally tell because they're anonymous, but they say the question they wanted to really ask was about the service that you charge yourself for rental maintenance.
Okay. Yeah. Great question. Internal rate. Are we charging service, or excuse me, are we charging rental from service a lesser rate for repairs and maintenance? The answer is no. Do not do that. Service should charge full rate. And here's why. Okay. And this is just best practice. It doesn't mean you're wrong if you're doing it and giving them a discount. Here's why I would charge them full. Number one, I want to know if my rental business can stand alone. And if I'm doing favors for my rental business by lowering my parts margins and lowering my service margins, how does that help me understand my business? It doesn't. My rental business should be able to stand alone where if tomorrow I sell off my OEM and I keep my rental business to sell to another person or whatever I do with my business, I want to make sure that my rental business has the capacity, the financials, and everything else to stand alone so that any investor who is interested in buying the business could see, hey, they were being charged full rate and they're still showing and producing profit and results at the end of the year. In addition to that, There are some tax ramifications with repairs and maintenance that you can take advantage of. I'm not going to get into any dual depreciation discussion on this call, but there are some things you can do to take advantage of the way that the tax code's written in present day.
Michael, I've got two more. I don't know if you want me to hold them for now. I'll let you know you got
how much time we got on the webinar?
Yeah, you got about 20, 25 minutes, somewhere in that range.
Okay, it seems like we're getting some good engagement here. So I'll answer these questions, and then I do want to jump to these other items. So go ahead.
Okay. Next one is, in your point of view, does rental need to be under a separate roof, or can it be under the same roof as the dealership?
Okay, this is a good one. I have a preference. I'll be honest. I have a preference. I've seen this operate now. I've probably seen 50 dealers at this point in the last year that have it separated, and I see it under the same roof. There are pros and cons. The ones that jump instantly out to me, my preference personally is separate. Okay. And the reason I say separate isn't because I want you to go spend more money on overhead. It doesn't have to be anything big, but the dealerships where I see it separated, because it is a separate business, it does completely allow you to focus on what is the primary goal of rental. When you don't keep it separate, I feel like we as sales first organizations, we tend to treat it like the redheaded stepchild. And so we don't invest as much in manpower. We don't invest as much in tooling. We don't invest as much in process. And we don't invest as much in our technicians for that market or our responsiveness to our customers. And so for that reason, I would say it doesn't have to be a completely separate building. I'm thinking of a dealer right now. I guess I'll talk about it, Beaumont Tractor, where they have it kind of separated by department style. And it's away from everything else enough to where they run their business. But I think it's a real struggle when it comes to leadership meetings where everybody brings in all the managers and then, sales always wins. It should be the customer always wins, not sales always wins. So how do we find a way to treat that like that? But again, that's my piece. That's my opinion. Now let me go to what are pros and cons. When you keep it separate, I kind of mentioned a bunch of that, but when you keep it together, here's some pros. Your team all knows each other. They work together hand in hand. You can more tightly control processes without opinions. So it allows you to be more of a dictator of how things will run. Because if you do separate it, you're going to have to trust somebody to run that efficiently. You typically hire a rental director, somebody who's in charge of that business, or even a branch manager, for the rental building or whatever you do there. And then also you're going to have some less disputes over fleet, right? When it is time to go grab that machine from rental because sales needs a machine and, the factory can't get us one. Well, we just put 2 in rental. Let's rob one from this. It's less of a discussion and more of this is happening. And so there's a lot of different, I could probably wax eloquent. That's probably a webinar in and of itself, standalone or otherwise, but those are just some top shelf, easy to understand items. So if you want to dive deeper, again, you can book a demo. I'll try to make some time for that.
All right. You want one more quick and then keep rolling?
Yeah. Hit me with one more.
All right. A little bit long here, so stay with me, but it says, in regards to selling service to your rental department, you mentioned using an in-house rate for customers who rent from you. Are you implying that the customers are responsible for routine maintenance on rented equipment, assuming long-term rentals that extend across equipment rental intervals? And then he says, in our market, customer expectations that maintenance expense is on our dime.
Absolutely correct. So if you're an established rental business or you're somebody who is trying to compete inside of an established market, the expectation is that your rate covers maintenance. That's true across the board. What I was stating is that you, if you're trying to claw into that market, could create a rental marketing program to grow your business, whereby you state to them that if you are renting the equipment from us and we will write up a program where instead of ownership, you're renting from us, right? You're transferring them out of ownership and into rental because it benefits that specific customer to not own the machine 12 months out of the year, to have a payment 12 months out of the year, but rather perhaps 7 months out of the year if they're in a gray market, right? Where it's sunny or wintertime for half the year. So I was more speaking towards a program whereby you would market your rental fleet over the sales department in specific circumstances to grow your rental fleet. And here's why: because I would rather a customer, rather than make, let's just say we make $5,000 on a customer selling them a piece of equipment this year, and then I don't get to sell to them for 3 years. I would rather them rent from me for $20,000 a month per year, and get the payments myself, but it's my piece of equipment. And if they do that for 3 years, that's $60,000 that covers one of my headcount. And then in addition to that, I get to sell the piece of equipment after that to somebody else. So transitioning customers from sales customers to rental customers is actually a profitable equation, not the other way around. So that's where I was going with that.
All right, sounds good. You got about 15 minutes, Michael.
All right, excellent. Let's keep moving. So what does the future hold for rental? So if you're a dealer who's like, okay, that's great, I'm already in rental, or, I'm planning to get in rental, or now I'm going to get into rental, and there's a whole host of topics we could talk about here. But I think really what I want to hit is, I was kind of just talking about products and services, right? You're not just renting products, you can also rent services, and you should be thinking about that. We're seeing this across the board in the rental industry. More and more dealers, rental houses are trying to figure out, how do we rent more services? And I'm going to kind of dime out the software industry a little bit. It's SaaS, software as a service. In other words, you're renting software every day of your life, right? Or leasing, or whatever you want to call it. But the bottom line is, we're here to help, but we're here to help so long as we get paid, right? And it's the same concept. You want to start thinking, how do I turn my business, the service, the headache that I come into every single day, and how do I transfer that from just I sell products and then it's somebody else's problem? Because we all know it's not somebody else's problem. They're buying from you because of your reputation for taking care of them after the sale. And so if you're already doing it, how do I sell that as a service? Okay. And that's rental. All right. So a rental business is already trained to think about this. I don't just rent you the piece of equipment. I have to maintain it while it's out. I have to help you while it's out. If you get it stuck, I'm out there in my boxers in the pond trying to rip the thing out. Right. And so that's what you want to think about, because that's where the industry is going. Operators is a really tough one. It's easy to rent an operator. I remember my brother, both of my brothers, honestly, they love to operate equipment more than run the business. And so, wintertime would hit in Buffalo, and they'd be missing, at 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. And I'd be like, where the heck are you guys? And they'd be like, well, we had a couple customers who needed some operators last night. We thought it'd be fun, so we went out and plowed snow, So that kind of stuff is already prevalent in certain markets. So be thinking about that. Renting by the job. Here's another one. Right now, United does a really good job of this. I think Hertz does a good job of this. Herc, excuse me. They rent by the job. So when a construction guy comes to them, they say, all right, I just won this job. They provide the specs of the job, the length of the job, duration of the job, and we become the experts of, here's what you'll need on the job. We'll organize all the rental for you, have it on site. We'll handle all the maintenance, and we bid one number for the whole job. That's something that dealers are going to get into. It's going to happen as we transition, as all these big names are starting to buy all different products. They're not just, we're known for skid steers anymore. Bobcat, for example, right now they've got all these different other provisions. Pretty soon, likely to get into aerial, right? And so once you're there, if your OEM is doing it, if one OEM does it, we all do it, right? We know how that goes. So online only, no physical dealership. This is going to happen. You're going to see this. You're already seeing it with some of the Chinese equipment. There's going to be the Tesla style model in the industry. You're going to see where dealers are service shops. You're going to see where there's mega service shops. People are still fighting against this. My blue collar side is aching just saying it, but it's the truth. Now, it's not something we should be afraid of. It's something we should plan for. Our profit, for those of you that are larger dealers, you already know your profits in service and parts. And the sales department, yes, it prints boatloads of profit, but it's going away. It's harder and harder. Margins are going to get more and more public. And you're going to be in a situation where if your service and parts isn't printing enough money for you, rental's the option. OEM ownership playing, I'm not going to speak much to that because I feel like that's a contentious topic. We'll talk about that later.
Michael, super quick one. If you want to just,
go ahead, hit it.
Do you have insurance on rental units?
Yes. Carry insurance on your fleet. Absolutely. But you insure it like inventory. And so you want to get certificates. If you're getting into rental, you want to make sure that every rental that you do, you're getting a certificate of insurance from your customer that covers your fleet. And then your insurance company will price you for every rental that is uninsured. Meaning if you're doing rental to homeowners, they will charge you for that rental, not the rental. So you'll have like your aggregate that floats over all of your fleet, which you want to make sure is covering your existing fleet in the event of a volcano, right, erupting under your dealership or something ridiculous. But actually, I have dealers in Hawaii, so that's not so ridiculous. But if catastrophic loss, you want to make sure that your insurance is covered aggregately. But it's not as expensive as you'd think, because as long as you're getting those COIs and you can prove that you're covered on those COIs to your insurance, they will decrease the premium to just the rentals without it. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do homeowner rental. You should absolutely do homeowner rental. Anybody who says otherwise, I will absolutely have a long-term conversation with you and tell you why you're wrong, because you're disabling the growth of our industry by doing that. Number one, it's going to cost you money. Number two, it's going to cost you money. Number three, it's going to cost you money in the long term. So we can talk about that. I'm very passionate about it. But anyway, McCain, any other questions at the moment?
There's one more that we haven't answered. It's kind of back to the beginning about why some people weren't getting into rentals, and just wanted to get this one addressed real quick. Says, we always sell shortly after it has been put in rentals, so we never fully develop a fleet.
Yeah, huge mistake. That's and here's why. It works great if your mission that all that bespokes is its old traditional sales mentality of, I'm doing what the OEM wants, but I'm always going to take the sale because that's the best money. It's wrong. It's plain and simple. It's wrong. It doesn't mean I've never been there. It doesn't mean I've never done it. Or, we put in 20 machines in May and 10 of them are still sitting there and I need a machine and I'm not going to take it. But what it does mean is if that's your course of business, is where you're putting them in and all of them are selling within a year, you don't have a rental fleet. You have more new fleet that you happen to be driving around from time to time. I would strongly encourage you to take a longer term view on that, and a more practical view as well, because you're not generating for yourself the opportunity or the revenue that you could. If you're putting in machines, let's just say you're putting in 20 a year, and this is a good transition statement. If you're putting in 20 a year and you're selling all 20, imagine what your fleet could be if you kept a 4-year rotation. You might have 80 machines on the ground at any given time, and you could sell 5 at any time and you wouldn't even notice it. But you're managing it because you're cash positive. So there's a couple key concepts I need to get into real quick. So McCain, hold questions. How much time we got? 10 minutes?
Yep, 10-minute warning.
All right. So, and for anybody still on the call, obviously you're interested in this topic. hopefully passionate about it. I'm happy to discuss more. Technology and telematics, we're doing API integrations. Everybody's got GPS on their things now. Buy a 3-year warranty on your equipment if you are offered it by the OEM, if you're an OEM. The role of AI, real quick, I'll speak to that. I'm building a product right now. Every single product that we are building right now is being inundated with requests from AI providers. There will be AI in all future software from today forward. It's just, what do you call AI? Is it ChatGPT? Is it I talk to my device? For example, Rent Hub, we're working on something where you can say, hey, Rent Hub, what machines does ABC Construction have on rent for me right now? And it says, here, it's these 3 machines, and it shows me the machines and talks to me if I want it to, right? Or hey, put a track loader on rent for ABC Construction for next month. Remind me in 2 days, something like that, where it puts it right into the system, makes the reservation. That kind of stuff is coming. But if your definition of AI is more like, hey, I want animation on the screen that tells me what's going on for the day and the best fleet items, all of it's coming. So everything you can think of that you think AI is going to do in fleet, I promise you it's already in development, and it's going to take years. We're probably 10 years out from using it practically inside of our dealerships, but we are 10 years out. We're not 20 or 30 years out. So it's exciting, we should be looking for ways of how to use it every single day. There is a QR code here. I'd like you to scan it if you're interested in rental. This is not a sales pitch. This is a how to do rental ebook that we kind of built. And so we have a vested interest. Obviously, we do have a rental product. We have a vested interest in you becoming a rental dealership, because you're going to need a tool to run it. So, we're not doing this out of the goodness of our hearts. I do it because I'm passionate about it, but from the standpoint of business, yes, we wrote this book so that you could get an idea of how to start. You can find out how to connect with me. And so go ahead and connect on that. If you'd like that code later, by all means, in the post survey, just ask for us to send it to you. We'll make sure you get it. I built Rent Hub with a team. We've got about a 12-person team right now. We are a DIS product. Our product will grow and eventually become its own business. I'd love to take Point of Rental down at some point, just because they've been in the industry for forever, and, they're a powerhouse. They've got a great product, nothing but positive things to say about it, but it's not integrated. And so the big advantage of Rent Hub is it's being homegrown by DIS, which has several DMS product offerings to offer. We're also going to be present on some other platforms in the future. So if you'd like a demo of what I've built, I'd be happy to show it to you. It's basically 3 screens you got to learn. Pretty simple, easy. It's mobile responsive. It's built on Facebook and Amazon code. The back end is Microsoft Azure, so it's future-proofed to the nines. And it is going to have AI embedded into it. As we continue to build, we will be generally releasing this product October 1st. Okay, I think I said almost everything I want to say about rental. And I don't mean to make my product sales pitch here kind of like an aside, but it really is, because I want those of you that listen to this or that are on the call to get real value. One thing I want to talk about that's a concept I just learned recently from a dealer, he won't mind me saying, MB Tractor, big Kubota dealer out in Boston. Mark Burgoyce, great guy. He has this concept that he calls cash positive or cash negative. And when you're running your fleet, if you have a pen and paper, just write this down: cash positive or cash negative per month. If you can find a way with your fleet, whatever fleet you own, whether it's 1 machine or 100 machines, every month you should want to know, did I bring in more cash than I sent out? Okay. In other words, the payments I made for all the fleet that I have plus interest, did I bring in more cash for my fleet than I sent out? Now, you're always going to have some equity financed equipment versus some debt financed equipment. If you don't know what that means, ask me later, which means you could offset that ratio. But for your collateralized equipment or your debt funded equipment, Are you cash positive or cash negative? And then for your owned equipment, are you cash positive, cash negative with repairs and maintenance and everything else? And that number you should watch to see, is it growing? Is it constant? And that's really like, that's your recovery metric in service is your cash positive, cash negative in rental. It's an awesome metric. It sounds like it's obvious. Some of you are probably already doing this. Look, I was a CFO for years. Then I was a CEO. I never used it, never even thought to use it. Always thought like I needed this number, but didn't know how to get to it. Mark helped me out with it. It's something we're going to try to develop and put inside a Rent Hub for you in one spot. You can look for it. But it's this awesome concept. So I wanted to pass it on. Mark, McCain, any questions from here?
There was one question. Maybe this will make a little more sense to you, hopefully, but it says, will you be integrating this to the other constellations DMSs? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because this is a DIS sponsored call, the statement I will make is it's being looked at.
All right. That's all that's in there right now. We do have about 4 or 5 minutes left. So if anyone has any final questions, now is the time. Let's see, here's one. They say it's a loaded question, but how would you choose the correct equipment in your rental fleet? Example, aerial, utility tractors, skid steers, forklifts, etc.
Yeah. Great question. Can I respond and ask, well, what's your OEM that you're using today? So if you could respond and let McCain know what OEM are you using? And if you got your market handy. If they don't respond, I'll start answering. McCain, just interrupt me if they respond. What'd you say?
Yep, go ahead. I'll let you know.
All right, sounds good. So here's what I would do. If you don't know where to start, drive into your competitor's parking lot. Okay. Anyone who rents in your area, go look at what they have and see what's parked. Chances are what's parked is going to be what's not moving for that season. So if you drive on site and it's midsummer and there's 10 track loaders for rent out front, chances are they're either overstocked or they're not moving right now for some reason. You want to see what's out on job sites in your market, right? You have to take an inverse approach. So when you get on site, if there's a bunch of stuff parked, don't think, oh, well, they have a ton of these, so I should have them. No, they probably had a large contract that they fleeted up for, and now they're sitting. Or it's equally possible that, they have those sitting there as something, you don't know, so you don't want to make assumptions there. But when you drive around your market, what do you see out on rent? Is it the compact excavators? Is it the skid steers? Is it the tractors? Do you have a lot of those of you that are ag customers, do you have a lot of implements that you see the same implement everywhere and it's a third market implement, but it works fantastic? That's a great place to start is, hey, we rent these now. You don't have to buy them. If it's not a complex, I don't recommend getting into complex implements if you're into the ag sector. Things like plows, rakes, all that kind of stuff is great. But if you get into the complex stuff, it can get difficult. I have seen success with balers. Some of the, I don't know what to call them. I'm not an ag guy, but the tree shaking attachments to get like the almonds out of the tree, stuff like that. I've seen success with rental there.
Michael, they said they specialize in pre-owned equipment, all makes, all models.
Excellent. So if you specialize in pre-owned, you're in the perfect spot, right? You're somebody that absolutely should go out, look at your other rental houses in the area. If you don't have other rental houses in the area, you already have pre-owned equipment. My recommendation to you is if you're pre-owned equipment, tomorrow you're a rental house. That means everything's for rent. If you're pre-owned equipment, you don't have OEM restrictions. We do. If you have a signed OEM, you have restrictions of what you can and can't do. I would recommend, now you might have some new from third parties and stuff like that. Don't put your new equipment out there, right? Unless you really feel that the dollar or the contract is worth it. But I would put, we rent, on a big sign somewhere outside, right? And anything that somebody wants to rent, just start renting. See what moves. Find your top 100 clients, call them. I can't stress enough. I think we as dealers do such a poor job of actually talking to our customers because we're so busy. So we never take the time to pick up the phone and just call the top 100 and say, hey man, I'm trying to grow my business and do this thing. Do you mind just telling me like what you've rented in the last year? And they're going to tell you, they know what they've been renting. And then you're like, hey, did you know I have that? I'll rent that to you, dude, next next time, call me, or call Mike, here's his number, whoever your rental guy is, and just field the rentals to them. And it's going to grow your business. So great question there with the pre-owned.
All right, I think we'll end on that note. I know there were a couple other questions. One was a question about something that was answered earlier, so it's a good time for me to remind you that this whole thing has been recorded. So if you missed the first part of the webinar, don't worry, we'll send you the full version within the next day or two that you can watch. Or if you'd like to share it with anyone, maybe you want to show this to your boss or somebody else at your company and talk more about that. So with that. I just want to say, obviously, thanks for being here. Thanks for those great questions. This was one of the more interactive webinars we've had, so that was a lot of fun. I think very productive, right, Michael? You'd agree?
Yes, absolutely. If anyone wants, I'll say this for the recording. This QR code here is different. This will get you in touch with me to talk about Rent Hub, and this is the one that you can actually reach me. So those of you that wanted to connect and know more, this would be where you would scan to get in touch with me, or you can find me on LinkedIn or whatever.
All right. And on that note, just want to say on behalf of DIS and Farm Equipment, thanks for joining us for today's presentation. As always, if you have other topics you'd like to hear us cover in future webinars, please, you know where to reach out to us. My email is mvogel@lessitermedia.com, or you can go to the Farm Equipment website, and it's pretty easy to reach out to us through there as well. So thanks again, Michael. Thanks everyone for being here, and hope everyone has a good rest of your Tuesday.
Take care.